Hey guys, I'm too busy playing Dead Space 2 in my porn dungeon, but Rich from Review Tech USA is going to review Dead Space 1 for you. Take it away, Rich.
Wow, Mike, all I can say is that because I'm doing this review for you guys, you owe me another visit to that dungeon, damn it. Let's do this. This is the original Dead Space for the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, and before every Captain Obvious comes out of the woodwork, yes, I know I'm reviewing a 3-year-old game, so be quiet. What made me want to review the original Dead Space is that there's still a lot of people out there that have not played this game. It's kind of surprising. And I strongly believe the reason for that is because a lot of people wrote this game off as just a Resident Evil clone. And to be honest, to a degree, they're right. But the Dead Space franchise does right what the recent installments of Resident Evil have done wrong. So let's get into this review and find out why you should give the Dead Space series a second look. The year is 2414, and due to the human race's parasitic ways, we have exhausted all of our resources on planet Earth. To remedy this situation, we have created these large spaceships called planet crackers. These ships literally go from planet to planet, pulling up the minerals and resources that the human race needs to survive. And when the biggest and most profitable planet cracker, the USG Ishimura, sends out a distress signal and goes dark, it becomes a big problem. It's at this point that engineer Isaac Clarke, along with several other crew members, go to find out what's going on with the USG Ishimura. This is when things go terribly wrong. The story in Dead Space is excellent and is told through audio logs, video logs, and short in-game cutscenes. Combine this with pretty believable voice acting and an incredible story,
Shit, we've got bigger problems. The ship's engines are offline and our orbit is decaying.
and Dead Space succeeds at capturing your imagination where the Resident Evil series has failed to. Like Resident Evil 4 and 5, Dead Space is a third-person shooter with an over-the-shoulder perspective. And although Dead Space won't earn points for originality, it does get huge kudos for refining the survival horror genre. One of the biggest changes is how Dead Space's graphical user interface is vastly improved from Resident Evil's. Instead of having to hit the pause menu and be jarred out of the Dead Space experience, all of the menus are implemented into the game's visuals, except for the weapons toolbench and store interface. What also makes Dead Space stand out in this somewhat crowded survival horror genre is the type of weapons that you use and how you use them to defeat enemies. Instead of the traditional sniper rifles, machine guns, and handguns, Isaac Clarke will instead use futuristic engineering tools such as a plasma cutter, a disc ripper, and a line gun. All of the weapons in Dead Space are a blast to use, have secondary fire modes, and can be upgraded at weapons toolbenches. Now, to be honest, some of the weapons do feel superfluous and they could have toned down on some of the options. But the vast amount of weapons and upgrades allows you to make Dead Space your very own experience. The biggest seller of the Dead Space series lies within the combat. Dead Space incorporated a feature called strategic dismemberment. In order to defeat the necromorphs, you have to shoot off their limbs. Shooting them in the head or chest will not work and will only waste your ammo. For those who haven't tested out the Dead Space series yet, this may sound like a gimmick, but this is actually the crown jewel in the Dead Space experience by adding a level of depth and strategy never seen before in the survival horror genre. To sum it all up, Dead Space is a cut above the rest. No pun intended. At its core, Dead Space does not stray too far from any other typical third-person shooter. You walk into a room filled with necromorphs, kill them all off, then move on to the next room. It's a rinse and repeat procedure. But once again, it's the small little innovations that Visceral Games included that make Dead Space stand out among the rest. An interesting feature that is incorporated is a light beam navigation system that helps guide your way. Simply click down on the right analog stick and a blue beam of light will point you in the right direction. Besides the plethora of weapons that are going to be at Isaac's disposal, he will also have telekinetic and stasis abilities. The stasis is used to slow down enemies and defective machinery, and kinesis is used to move large objects and can turn random items into weapons. Now this idea has popped up in previous games like BioShock, but has never been implemented into a survival horror game or done as well as it is in Dead Space. The final and most important design choice that Visceral Games made is that they allowed Isaac to move while he is attacking. This allows you to be much more agile in huge necromorph battles, allows you to aim your weapon with pinpoint precision, and will make you less vulnerable to attacks from behind, which will happen quite often. Oh, give me a break, I had no other way to word it. Friggin' perverts. One of the complaints I do have about Dead Space is that it should have had a wider variety of enemies. Aside for the couple epic boss battles you'll encounter, most of the enemies will start repeating themselves after Chapter 4, and that does make the overall experience feel somewhat shallow. Don't get me wrong, Dead Space is still a blast, but it does make the strategic dismemberment concept feel less strategic. This single-player only title does come with its share of flaws, but the imperfections won't keep you from revisiting the Ishimura again and again.
Use the locator system to find your next objective.
In any video game title, visuals and sound design are very important. This is especially true in the survival horror genre. If either of these aspects are lacking in any way, the game will fail. Dead Space pretty much succeeds in both departments, but does fall a little bit short. In the sound department, it's safe to say that Dead Space is an epic win all around. From the eerie cries of crew members being attacked in the distance, all the way to the muffled sound effects you experience in the vacuum of space, make Dead Space not only the best sounding game of this generation, but the best sounding survival horror game I've ever witnessed. The only complaint I have is that Visceral Games overused the cheap loud sound effect trick to try to get a rise out of you. But beyond that, the sound design is near perfect and will definitely help draw you into the experience. Now visually, Dead Space is a mixed bag. Yes, the lighting effects are incredible and the atmosphere that Visceral Games has created is top notch, but after 2 or 3 chapters, all of the aesthetics become insanely repetitive. I do understand that they were going for realism and there would be quite a bit of visual repetition on a spaceship, but if it wasn't for the incredible story and top-notch gameplay, the repetitive atmosphere of Dead Space would put you to sleep. Overall, the presentation of this game is very well done, but sadly the uninspired environments and cheap scare tactics keep Dead Space from being a perfect experience. For every Double Dragon there is a Streets of Rage, for every Doom there is a GoldenEye, and for every Pac-Man there is a Casey Munchkin. Yeah, I'm that much of a nerd, you get the point. What I'm trying to get at is, every single successful video game franchise in history had copycats. And if you're like me and stuck your nose up at Dead Space when it was launched in 2008, you're missing out. Like I said in the review, Dead Space isn't perfect, and it did take a lot of ideas from the Resident Evil series. But copycat or not, the fact remains that Dead Space steered the survival horror genre back on course. Review Tech USA gives Dead Space a 4 out of 5. Alright, Mike, I'm all set over here. Back to you. Mike? 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 Oh, God. Why am I hard?
3 kilobytes.